in theory, we're live right now, Ray.
In theory, we're live right now, right?
We're definitely live. Video, the audio feedback proves that we are in fact live. So everyone in the chat right now, I would like to welcome our very special guest, Ray Arrastia. He is the line developer for Battletech, and he is also the which basically means he's like the main guy for Battletech at this time in terms of like rules, progress for the setting, etc. This is the man. Every bad thing you can blame. No, I'm just kidding. Every bad thing, it's all Ray's fault. No, it is a very great honor to have you here today. So welcome aboard, everyone, to Ray Arrastia.
Thank you for inviting me, and thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Yeah, so today there's not really any particular topic we're going to talk about other than Battletech, so I just figured we would talk about Battletech. So a lot of people will ask for origin stories and things like that. Ray has done multiple videos with origin stories, so we're just not going to do that. Instead, we're just going to talk about general stuff. So we'll start with something that's close to my heart, and I think it's close to yours. I'm pretty sure your favorite part of the setting is the Succession Wars, isn't it?
Yes, definitely. Pre-Fourth Succession War is when I was introduced to the game, and to me, that's where a lot of the flavor for the setting and the game itself was born. And, you know, most people love the setting at the time that they're introduced to it, so, you know, it's nothing that unusual, but I love the Succession Wars era.
And so I also love the Succession Wars, but what is your favorite aspect of the Succession Wars?
I think it was the smaller focus. Everybody was fighting everyone on small planetary, continental scales. They really pushed the idea of feudalism at the beginning, and that means that the ruler of the next county over may have a beef with you, and you could get a pair of battle mechs fighting just over some small squabble. You have battles for anything, you know, and the old trope that most people hate nowadays, what is it, a lance of mechs taking a planet or something like that. It lets you play out on the table anything in the setting that you wanted.
I am also big on just two leopards showing up on a planet and having a decisive battle with someone else. I actually agree with that. I love the Succession Wars for that. That's why it's my jam. It's my favorite. I also love the House Lords and all like the petty internal and external politics of feudalism. That's what sells the whole setting for me. Like I just love it. But I got started with the clan invasion and I regressed. But so let's ask a more interesting question than just, why you like the Succession Wars. What is your favorite novel? Ooh. And that can be new, old, doesn't matter. There's no time lock in here. Just which one's your favorite?
My first gut answer is always going to be Wolves on the Border. I'm just thinking there's so many different novels I could answer, but it's always going to be Wolves on the Border. I think that not only is it a good story and good novel, but I think it's a really good introduction to the setting at that time.
Yeah,
it gives you just enough to buy into the setting. Whereas another contender for me, again going way back, is the Decision at Thunder Rift. There's just enough, exposition in the prologue. So, okay, I get it. I have enough to see what this little personal story is, what the context is for it. But Wolves on the Border, definitely.
I think that almost everybody will answer Wolves on the Border at some point, including me. Like my old favorite was Wolves on the Border. I have not reread that story though in 21 years. It's 22 years now. I actually just started rereading Warrior on Guard, for the first time in like 20. Like I was like 11 when I read this the first time. So there are whole chapters I read, and I'm like, I do not remember any of this. Like not a moment of it. But there's other parts where I'm like, this is exactly what I remember. Like, like that are key moments where it's like, I just finished the chapter where it's the trial between Justin and obviously being accused of being a traitor, and like half of it I forgot. Like half of it just but like obviously the most vigorous parts were like like he's having his big moment where him and Hans are kind of hashing it out because of I'm not going to spoil this 30-year-old book, but there's this big moment of hashing it out. I remember that, but everything leading up to that, it's like this fake, like just gone. It's blank. But let me see here.
I think it's good to reread those every once in a while. It's got to be a little over 5 years since I've read Warrior or Wolves on the Border. Thunder Rift must be about 2 years ago or so. But for one, I think those of us that have been in it a long time hold those very precious, obviously, and see them with rose-colored glasses. And if we don't reread them every once in a while, those rose-colored glasses could be really thick, And
this was the perfect novel. There was nothing wrong with this novel.
Yeah. And I don't say that to criticize them. I think it's more reminding ourselves of what was fun, so we can enjoy the story, the new story as it comes out in novels and source books and stuff, and not take them as seriously as we do sometimes. Because you go back and it's great pulp fiction.
Yes.
It's not outstanding literature. It is great, fun pulp fiction. And that's what we strive for with our current stories and source books. And sometimes there's a disconnect between our memories and the reality.
I'm gonna do it. This is the story of Nicole, who cried a river and drowned the free worlds.
I already hung up on you once.
You know what? You know what? I still, like, a lot of people don't know this still, but the very first interaction I ever had with you is honestly the funniest thing that has ever happened to me in regards to Battletech. Where it was either on, I forget which Discord it was on, but it was on one of the Battletech Discords, and I was talking to someone about hunting season, and in that, and this was I'd only read it once, and I'd read it like 2 or 3 years prior to that. I'm like, I don't know, she doesn't seem like a very strong leader, blah, 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 and you chimed in, you responded directly to me, you're like, you should read the book again. I'm like, and I was just like, oh, the line developer from Battletech just told me I was wrong. There's a reasonable, that's actually, maybe I really missed something here. I read through it, I'm like, every mean thing I've said about this person has been made yet doubly true.
Well, I think we learn from each other.
But no, you know what? I wasn't even mad, because I was like, that's amazing. He gaslit me into rereading a whole novel.
And that's probably where I started to say that there's a difference between developer intent and words on the page. Sometimes they just don't match.
But I think in general, you guys have done a fantastic job. Of course, I have not brought Ray on here for me to be a sycophant, just to be very clear. But no, in general, it's pretty well known. I like most of the new fiction that has been coming out. And since you brought up, of course, the subject of the new fiction, what is, in your opinion, the most exciting part of the current roster of fiction that we can talk about that you guys have been developing? What's your favorite part of the new era?
Broadly, I'd say everything happening in the Hinterlands, just broadly, or the existence of the Hinterlands itself.
Yeah.
Both what we intended, things that have happened sort of organically or by accident. There definitely was the intent to recreate something like the Chaos March, because the Chaos March was fun, but it lasted 2 seconds.
Yeah.
So we wanted to create that sort of playground there. But it sort of just happened. Or I mean, there was the opportunity. There wasn't any long-term plan for the Hinterlands. It was like, okay, so the Falcons just disappeared. They left all this open space, and they're dead. It would be super boring if we just had the Lyrians or the horses just swallow that up immediately. So, the Hinterlands were born, and we've gotten a huge response to Hinterlands in general. And specifically, then I would say I'm really liking a lot that we've seen with G's Falcon.
Oh, G's Falcons are Jade Falcon at its best. I've never been so happy with the Falcons.
I understand you're a fan of Malvina.
I love Malvina. Yeah. He was a wonderful human being.
But the Hinterlands. There's plenty of things I'm excited about, but we can't really get into that. That's things we're trying to get to and roll out, and storylines, and
the really fascinating thing about the Hinterlands is there's really only 4 outcomes that can really happen, though, which is either the Lyrians roll in, they print enough kroner just to trick people into thinking they still have money, and they take over the area. The Hell's Horses actually, roll through and gobble up most of it. Maybe it's split between the 2 of them, or one power manages to grab all of that territory and holds out. Because if they're divided, there's just not the strength to resist either of those big forces next to them. So those are kind of like it. Like, either you're going to have... or it's divided between the horses and the Steiners in some way, but it's sort of like gravity, like planet. In fact, politics in general, in terms of nations, it's a lot like gravity. One thing picks up and it gets bigger. The bigger it gets, the more it draws in. It's sort of like that here. If there's not a critical mass of power, it's just those places can't continue to be independent because they'll be predated on by their larger neighbors.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The trick is to make any of those paths interesting.
Yes.
And that's what we're striving for. And we're striving to not allow that to happen overnight. And I know there has been a sense of that hand of God moving things around there, but people like that setting, and so we're not going to immediately go in those directions. But no, you're right. There's a limited amount of ways this is going to go. Just hope the ride is enjoyable.
Yeah, I'm excited for any of those outcomes. There's none of those outcomes where I would sit there like, this sucks. Like every single one of them has a lot of actual value to it in terms of storytelling, building up characters and factions. So, I'm there for it. Everybody loves the Hinterlands. I have spoken for the chat. The chat has no opinion now. I have said everyone loves the Hinterlands, and thus they do. Well, then. So, after the Hinterlands, what is your next favorite area? I'm putting you on the spot. I'm asking the tough questions.
I'll get this thing out of the way. For the 30-something, almost 40 years that I've been a Battletech fan, I'm a Davion, a Federated Sons player. They are my favorite faction. But I love all the factions. I love everything going on in the universe. So I would immediately say that's my area of interest. But in the Oakland era, not that interesting at the moment. There's potential there. We're moving towards certain things. I would say my next place of interest would be the Free Worlds League.
Oh, Purple Bird is always strong.
And the thing is, they have not. They didn't get a lot of love in the original Succession Wars storyline. But they're one of the more interesting houses because of the nature of the government. It's not necessarily feudal, but the fact that it is made up of all these minor states, minor and major states, is where you could really see that sort of original feudal idea play out, where they may be part of the Free World League, but these two governments don't see eye to eye, and they're going to fight. And there's nothing anybody else could do about it unless it gets majorly out of hand. And I know that became the meme that they're constantly at civil war, but it's not. It was the one civil war with Janos and
Xanos and not Anson. It was
Anton.
Yeah, Anton. Yeah,
right. But it's not that it's civil war; it's that it's a collective of governments. So I find them interesting in general, and right now there's a lot of separate conflicts there, both happening now and about to go off. That I think is interesting now, and we'll see more interesting stuff there in the future.
You know, the one thing I love about the Free Worlds League, and people know it's my favorite faction. You know, of course, Space Yugoslavia is the best example of governance in BattleTech. But the thing I love about it is people misunderstand. They think that the Parliament has a lot of power, but if you look at where the power is, it's the duchies. Like even like, you know, you take a look at like you know, whoever's Captain General, it matters. That person's powerful and important, but they're really just the most powerful and important duke. The like, you know, the Parliament is there basically to appeal to the independent planets and to the idea that they're, quote, democratic, but the decisions are made between the big dukes. When the big dukes decide that something's going to happen, it happens. You know, it's just like, I always think it's funny. People are like, oh yeah, but there's elections on these planets. I'm like, and yeah, they always vote the way the Duke tells them to. Isn't that interesting? It's just funny how that happens. That all of these democratically elected people, when the Duke tells them to vote a certain way in the Parliament, they magically do. It's just fascinating how that works. Democracy at its finest.
Yeah.
But enough of me.
For interesting stories, and that makes for a lot of gameplay within the Free World League.
Yeah, you've got battles not only with all of their neighbors, but you also have battles between themselves. I remember when I told Randall at Adepticon, I said, you know what, the Free Worlds League's the only faction that could actually win in Battletech and not ruin the setting. And he just stared at me funny, and he's just like... I'm just like, yeah, like they could literally conquer the rest of the Inner Sphere, and within a year, it would just be back to normal.
Yeah.
So Spectre says, Ray, give us back Davion Heavy Guards.
Someday.
Someday? Oh, nice.
Sure. You can't keep the guards down.
So you guys, like, just as a quick aside for Davion, because I know that you've mentioned you're a big Davion fan. I actually think that the Davions got the best outing during the Ilclan era, because I think the best non-Hinterland story was the conclusion to the Combine Fed Sun War. Like, like it was. I love Damocles Sanction. It's my favorite BattleTech novel. It's the first one to bump off Wolves on the Border for me. So.
Well, I'm really happy to hear that. Really happy to hear that. And obviously everybody else reading that story in the source book, they've got a different perspective than on our side of the fence. It was more about putting out a huge blazing fire and wondering how it would be received. So if you enjoyed it, you find that a fascinating story right now, then I'm glad. It's just I've got to different view of it.
Well, I said that story in and of itself. The aftermath of that story, I don't have as much interest in. I mean, like, I'm interested to see where things will go for Davion. I have sympathy for Kurita in the context that they're now trapped in a storyline with the Rosselhaig Dominion. but I do, like, you know, I have things that are interesting, but I mean, that story in and of itself, I think, is the strongest story to come out. The conclusion of the war, the actual, like, this is the end of Toranaga's arc. You know, like, he's outdone by his disciple, he's tricked, he's destroyed. Julian Davion rises up to be the success that he needs to be, but he's battered and bruised. And, you know, like, if he was the man at the beginning of that campaign, the Federated Sons would look like a resurgent empire, but now he's a wounded man. He's obviously has post-traumatic stress disorder. Like, you know, so you have this imperfect, flawed leader who is the champion of a state that is reeling. And, you know, like, there's this sense that, you know, who's going to pull us up, right? You know, yeah, we threw the Combine out, we threw the Capellans out, but the army is dead. The state is in ruin. Like, what do you do?
Exactly.
So let's talk Steiner bankruptcy. Let's talk as much as you can about I know there's a lot of Lyrans in the chat. They're very popular. I love where Steiner is right now, but that's probably because I'm a Free Worlds League fan. Kick them while they're down. So Steiner's in the worst position it's ever been in, ever.
Yeah.
There's never been anything close to this bad. Even the first Succession War is arguably better than Steiner is today. So are you guys thinking of doing anything with that? Because, like, I think it's fascinating that they're basically still, you know, bordering on the abyss. And when do you think we're going to see the 30 million kroner bill come into existence?
They are on a trajectory. They're one of the problematic factions in that we want, in general, we're not trying to clown on any faction, you know, kill anybody's darlings. But they are on a trajectory, and we're following through with that trajectory. It's really hard for Lyran fans. I have difficulty seeing a point in the future where people can cheer for them again, for when they bounce back. But I think things are going to get interesting because of the fact that they are down on the ground. They are where Davion was a few years back. In a different sense, they're losing territory. They're losing their economy. Davion lost their military, and in a sense, that was the original core concept of those factions. You know, Davion had the military to back up their mouth. The Lyrans had the endless pool of money they could rely on. And both of them lost it.
Well, I mean, the Lyrans still can rely on an endless pool of money if they just print the money. If they just print the money, Ray.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I had to do it. Poor Trillian sitting there. She's like, why won't the mercenaries take our kroner? They're just like, you printed too much of it. She's like, but how much more do we have to print before they'll take it?
Well, I mean, the mints that they had planned on Gaina was definitely a bad idea.
So you guys are going to be obviously exploring all of these factions into the future. Which faction do you think right now? So you mentioned the Free Worlds League is the most interesting to you in terms of like where things kind of are, where's their story going to go, what type of environment they're going to be in terms of the big factions, obviously not counting the Hinterlands. We talked a bit about Davion. Where do you see things going with probably something a little bit more controversial, at least in my chat, is Where do you see good times on the horizon? Not good times as in everybody having a good time, but interesting times on the horizon for the Draconis Combine and Rosselhaig Dominion. Are we gonna get some type of expansion into that space?
Yes. I think the stories we will see come out of there will be really interesting, and I think, in contrast to what I said about the Lyrans, I think we're very close to getting to the point where we're going to see some cool things happen with both the Draconis Combine and the Rosselhaig Dominion, where some fortunes will be reversed, and fans of those factions will cheer again. I mean, the Draconis Combine had the hugest win, I think, of anybody in the storyline since Word of Blake. They took New Avalon. But I also find that Yuri is becoming a more and more interesting character, and that what she was able to do to Toranaga, I don't know, that excites me. I want to see more from her.
It looks good on paper, but generally when you kill the generational commander at a time when your nation is embroiled in conflict, generally for her own political survival, it makes tons of sense. But is it good for the nation?
I think possibly the cost of the nation, yes.
Yeah. It's like, well, we killed the guy who defeated the Nova Cats and the Federated Sons. They're like, oh, but do you have a replacement? Yeah, we have this guy.
We'll see a replacement eventually. I don't know how people will respond to that character, however, but we'll see.
Well, I mean, it's mentioned in the latest Rereading novel that she wants to see Kitana, if I remember correctly. So I'm guessing that character will make some type of resurgence at some point.
Very likely.
I only mention it because it's in a published novel.
Yeah. Well, and there is more sitting around, just not published yet.
Nice.
Yeah.
Let me think here. What other fun things can we talk about? So when was the decision made to have the Compelling Confederation humiliated on the world stage? I'm joking, because the Cappies are clearly not going to defeat the New Star League in their campaign towards Tarot.
Well, what I find interesting there, as a fan, is the opinion has been for the longest time, the Capellans and the Wolves are unbeatable. Just that's in the past decade, if not more, that's where you see fiat, right? So what happens if you put them together? And that's kind of tough. My hope is with the source book and the accompanying novels, I hope it will be an interesting story.
A singularity.
But I think I wouldn't say that they are humiliated.
I'm of course joking. I'm being hyperbolic that they're being humiliated, of course.
I think, when you put those two together, what we wind up with is they're each going to give as good as the other. And while we have some spoilers about the Star League out there, it is not, and I don't think I'm spoiling necessarily now, it's not going to be a wolf win.
Oh, interesting.
Okay, let's just tamper that down a little bit so people give the story a chance at least.
Oh no!
Right? Well, like for instance, the Wolves are in it. Does that mean you will read it? Don't you stay away from anything?
I generally do, but I did say I was making an exception for this particular, because if I don't read it, I literally can't know what's going to happen in the setting. There's a lot of stories you can kind of skip because they're peripheral to the core plot line. I'm not necessarily particularly happy to read it, but I will be reading it because it's kind of required.
I will say, especially as we're getting into that discussion, Wolf Fiat, Compelling Fiat, Wolf versus Compelling.
The 35 years of Wolf tyranny, Ray. 35 years of it.
Let's go for 40. Look, we, the developers, the writers, the creatives in Battletech, we're aware. We are aware, right? We're aware. Okay. So, like, for instance, very recently in the last several years, Alaric has become a very universally not liked character.
I mean, generally, I think Malvina is actually legitimately more popular than him at this point.
Right. And I've heard many people just beg, just kill him off. Kill him. Just he slips on a bar of soap. Right? That doesn't make for a good story.
I completely agree with you. I actually have told, because people in my chat will often remark that they wished Alaric would just die, and I was just, and
Sure.
even and you know, I am famously hate Alaric and the Wolves, but even I point out, I'm like, that's just not how storytelling works. You can't just, like, you know, if you had him slip on a banana peel, you're doing like this a narrative crime. It's a crime against the setting for him to die that way. There's no payoff then.
Exactly. Everything's about the payoff. So all I could ask, you know, this thing has been going for 40 years now, is patience. Patience for this arc to wrap up, another arc to start, that to wrap up, and so on. Just wait for the payoffs. And I think I'm very excited for the direction we're going in general. Yeah. I'm talking about the Wolves versus the Cabals, the Star League, Alaric, all the houses, the Intersphere clans. I'm really excited for the next several years that we have planned. And it's not an ego thing, because all these story points, they're all group efforts from, you know, the meetings that we have. There was several of us creatives, and thinking of these plot points down to the individual authors, that whether it's tiny pieces in shrapnel or novellas or novels that carry out those plans. It's a team effort. I'm proud of the team so far, and I'm really excited for where we're going. And I'm saying that not just as the lead developer, but as a fan, a longtime fan of the setting.
I mean, I like myself, obviously, I can't actually remember my life before Battletech, which is pretty remarkable and sad in a way, but I like it. It's okay. But like, I like about 75%, 80% of what has been coming out, right? Like, you know, I may seem like a harsh critic at times, but, you know, in all sincerity, I think you guys have knocked it out of the park for most of the things you guys have popping up in the Old Clan era. You know, like the Hinterlands, which has really gotten the most attention. Like, if you look at the number of novels, you guys have a Hinterlands-based source book. But, I mean, it all works. The Hinterlands is incredible. I'm super looking forward to Letter of the Law. Like, we'll find out if I love it or hate it when it comes out, but I like Phil. I like his writing. I'm looking forward to it. You know, we've got, there's more novels obviously coming out that I don't know about or anything, but that's one that I know comes out on the 25th. You know, Ilkon's Eyes Only might not be the thing I'm the most looking forward to, but it's an important book. It is, right. It's a book that is, there's a reason I'm going to read it. Because, like, it impacts things outside of just Clan Wolf. It's not just a Wolf book. It's gonna be discovering, like, it's really gonna be showing. I think I'm just predicting this. I don't really know much about it, but I'm pretty sure it's the capstone on the current set of source books coming out. So, like, you know, it's really like a culmination of years and years of stuff coming out, and it has stuff that will touch on that, I suspect.
Yes, that's correct.
I'm good at predicting things.
And there's, besides the source book, there is the novel Trial of Birthright, and the novel Blood. Blood something. Blood Will Out, I think.
Yeah, it's going to be the Compelling side of the story.
Right. And they're not simultaneous stories. One sort of leads into the other, even though they're separate points of view. One is the Terran story, and one is the Compelling story.
Yeah.
But one picks off where the other one leaves off. And besides the source book, the novel is important for deeper details, deeper reasoning for certain events. And I could speak a little bit to you. You talked about the importance of the book, whether or not you enjoy them, or it's the importance. So on a typical story, let's say a novel, I will, for instance, get the pitch that this is what the story is going to be, and I put in my notes for the sake of story continuity and all that. Goes back to the writer. He works with John or Phil. It goes through fact check. I might, depending on the story, give it one more review, depending on different factors, and goes through final edit and gets published. So on these, I was involved in almost every step.
Oh, wow.
After the first draft, not only did I write notes, but myself, Michael Ciaravella, the author of Trial of Birthright, and John, our head editor, met for 4 days, I think 4 days in a row for several hours after hours, just hammering through almost line by line of the book, because there's so much important stuff in there that we need to get right. And you know, I'm about to review the second draft, which should hit all the notes now. It should hit all the notes. But I'm concerned enough about the story that I want to make sure that it does hit those important notes. It's not a case of micromanaging, because again, I don't normally do that. It's that this is really important.
Written by Michael Ciaravella in brackets next to it. It says Ray Arrastia.
I mean, yes, that's funny, but no, I would not take that kind of credit. It's not that. It's more. I've had to go in and rewrite some stuff on other books before, but not in this case. It's more about hitting the right notes with certain characters and certain events. And again, this really is a concern for the story and what we all, or the fans, get out of it.
Yep.
You know, there has to be certain explanations that make sense. There has to be, you know, a modicum of fan service here and there and get us pumped for things. There has to be seeds planted for things down the line. You know, for instance, you've been really critical of the whole Rasselhaig Dominion thing, and completely valid. And we knew that we were going to get flack, and that's because there were no seeds planted. But nobody touched the Rasselhaig Dominion for a decade at least, and going back.
Yeah, about a decade, yeah.
Yeah, and just barely. So you could go maybe about 2+ decades, which translates to almost 75, 80 in-universe years that we didn't hear anything from. So anything that we did with them, other than them sitting there, would be questioned. And we went way beyond that. So it's all valid. We just didn't have the time to then backfill those years. We're going to, but it is backfilling. And that's something else that we have to look for. Make sure, you know, we have so many years planned ahead. We have to make sure those seeds get planted.
So you guys also, like, you know, obviously we're going to be putting Ilkhan's Eyes Only coming out, and that's kind of the capstone. And if I remember correctly, did you say that in the future it's not going to be the source books driving the fiction, it will be the fiction driving the source books? Is that kind of how things are going to be transitioning over the next few years?
Tentatively, yes. It's just that, to me, that feels more like seems kind of flippant. The story drives the story. It's best to have the story in fiction because there it's driven by characters.
Yeah.
Okay. But the whole thing about the phrase is novels lead the way, fiction leads the way.
There we go.
And fiction leads the way. Yes, that is the preferred method. In execution, it's really difficult. It's just the processes. Again, rose-colored glasses. What was done back in the FASA era, because we didn't have that with WizKids, SamPro, Catalyst to this day. We're trying to recreate something that was done in the 80s and 90s that does not work now. It inherently does not work. So we're trying to make new processes as we go to make that work. For instance, I'll give you one example. With this source book, Ilkhan's Eyes, we'll cap off like the 3152 story from Ilkhan Terra all the way through these 2 years worth. And we're going to kind of rest. I know everybody, and I'm talking about not just fans, but our team wants to keep plowing through. But what we're going to do on the game side, on my side, is we're going to focus on non-story elements for a bit. More campaign books, the force manuals, and some other things that I want to do to expand the setting as it is currently instead of move the story, which will give fiction some time to catch up and get a little bit ahead.
Basically, you'll have a store of novels or other materials ready to go out in a shorter fashion because most of the hard work would already be done. So
which gives us time not only for the fiction to catch up and move forward, but also to refine these processes and necessarily create new ones to make that work. It's really a case of production issues. Today, putting out a source book or a box set or anything like that compared to putting out a novel, they are completely different. And that's what, one of the things we've been struggling with. But, you could say fiction leads the way. We want fiction to lead the way. But I don't think that's necessarily 100% the way it has to be. And it's also really difficult now to achieve. If anything, I think it's a combination of the rose-colored glasses of the way it was done. We're talking about the first few years of FASA, where they didn't think Battletech was going to go anywhere.
Yeah, you're talking 1986, basically,
Yeah. They were winging it. We know that now from all the...
There's no geniuses here. They were winging it.
There's no geniuses here either. But we're building on all that. But there's also the Jihad era, which had no fiction major... sorry. What is it? The Blake is...
It's too late. We'll just say Jihad. It's too late. It's okay. I forgive you. No, just the YouTube algorithm doesn't like certain words. It's not the end of the... It's okay. I forgive you. You know what's funny is every time I have someone from Catalyst on here, everyone will make that slip the first time they come on. Scroggins did. Brian did. It's like, I just expect it. I'm like, I've got someone from Catalyst coming on. I guarantee you they're going to say Jihad.
I think one of your moderators is supposed to ban me now. But huge story, and there was no fiction. The total antithesis of the way Battletech was when it was born. So there's a lot going into that idea. We have to have fiction first. But there are people that don't read the fiction. They just get it from the source books. There are people that don't look at the source book.
They just get the novels, yeah.
Battletech means a lot of different things to different people. So
I like, for the most part, I have mostly been more of a source book guy than a novel guy. I like the novels, it's not a, but there's a reason why, like, I tend to be somebody who reads a novel once. Like,
Right.
I read it once, and then if I'm referencing something ever again, it's almost always going to be the affiliated source books or whatever. Those are the things I'll go back to all the time. Those are the things I'll read, more often. But like a lot of the fiction is very good. Some of the fiction over the years is like, it's like any property.
Yeah.
There's hits and misses. I'm generally just really grateful that most of what Catalyst has put out, especially for the mainstream books, have been hits. Like, at least in my opinion, they've been hits. Again, not this is plenty of critical things to say. This is not me being a sycophant, but it's, I appreciate, like, if you guys hadn't done Tamar Rising and Empire Alone, like after the initial Ill Clan source book, I'm not trying to run down any particular source books. It is what it is. But like, I probably wouldn't have paid much attention to the Ill Clan era. Like, like if those books hadn't been as strong as they were, if Redemption Rights wasn't as strong of a novel as it is, if Without Question, A Question of Survival wasn't as strong as it was, and if Damocles Sanction wasn't my favorite Battletech novel, I probably would have, like, just been like, well, they're doing stuff right now. Look, guys, miniatures. We have miniatures now. Oh, wow. Isn't this amazing? Do you guys remember 3049? I remember 3049. Like...
I totally get that. I totally get that. And this is where I say that, everybody involved, from the developers, the writers, the artists, we're all fans too. And what you said just there, that those particular books and novels kind of turned you around. Well, that was the intent. That was the intent. We saw where we were and decided we had to do some course correction and come up with some other ideas.
Yeah, and
again, that's not to disparage anything that came before, because, dude, obviously the things I won't say because I feel responsible for the line, but there's plenty of duds, in my opinion, in the past 40 years. There are plenty of plot points that I cannot stand. It is what it is. But, putting aside any blind spots that each of us personally have, we are really trying to make this enjoyable, fun, exciting for everybody.
I always try to tell people it's more about the general direction. So if things are generally good, if the stories are generally good, then there's a lot of optimism. So like, there will be things like, I was pretty crushed after Dominions Divided. Like, I was pretty like, I don't know about this train, man. Like, did I hop on this train at the wrong time? But the truth of the matter is like, that's one book, and it's against a trend of novels and source books that are generally really good. Like, I mean, like, just as a whole. And it's one of those things where it's just like, sometimes, like, for me to say that like Battletech gets it right 3/4 of the time, if you compare that to what I think of other franchises, it's pretty bleak by comparison. If you're like, oh yeah, Red, Battletech gets it right 75% of the time. Who gets it right 100% of the time? It's like, most other franchises get it right 40% of the time. Like, I'm not there for most of them. I tend to be very willing to discard things that I don't think are helpful or good. So if something's not good, I moved on from Warhammer.
Right. I think if Battletech was like most other franchises, I think what we would have seen is 40 years of the Federated Sons and maybe a little hint of the Lyrians and the Cretans. I think that's where the story would have been. And that would have been boring. And as a Davion fan, that probably would have, I would have gone cold on it. Heck, again, as a Davion fan, my biggest complaint about the Forced Succession War, which was their shining moment, is that they steamrolled the Capellans. I would have loved a real fight.
War. Yeah, like an actual conflict, rather than just like, Yeah, so the Capellans fold like a cheap house, or a cheap, cheap chair. It's like, that's fine, but that's not satisfying.
Exactly.
That's why I love the War of 3039. My favorite conflict during the Succession Wars is 3039. It's for me, it's 3039, the Third Succession War. Those are the two moments of the Succession Wars where I'm like, this is awesome, because like nothing is funnier than Hance basically going in for a cheap meal and getting punched in the face.
I completely agree. I don't think you're going to find a bigger fan of the guy than me, and for him to get out bluffed, that's great story. Because it was him and Takashi the whole way, and Theodore comes around and out hands his hands. That's great. I love that.
Theodore's still one of my favorite characters. I absolutely love Theodore. And the Smoke Jaguars got to find out from Theodore too. That's also, and I'm a huge Smoke Jag fan. So the fact that the Smoke Jags basically got absolutely run over by Theodore at the end of the day, I'm like, awesome. Get on you, Smoke Jaguar. You made a terrible mistake. You decided to fight Theodore Kurita.
Yeah.
You should have switched spots with the Jade Falcons, and they would be gone, and you would still be here. Sorry, I can just imagine the Jade Falcon sitting there one day. It's like the Smoke Jag's like, maybe I want to fight the FedCom instead. They're like, no, man, you got those Kuritans. They helped Damaris, don't you know? He's like, oh yeah, that's right. Goes in there and gets completely destroyed. Somebody had to go down that column.
Are there any unusual, unlikely matches that you would like to see?
Oh, you mean people who aren't traditionally able to fight each other very often? Ooh.
Which they've managed to do a few times in the setting, and we're going to see that. Well, the Wolves versus the Capellans. We've never really seen anything like that.
Yeah. I mean, obviously the one we never get to see is House Davion versus House Kurita, or House Marik versus House Steiner. Those are really just kidding. I have to I love you blink on the camera like, what is this guy talking? But no, I would probably... That's a really good question, because like it's got to be like really satisfying too. Yeah. And a lot of these factions who I would point out have already fought is the other thing. Like, I'm like, Wolf versus Marik has happened multiple times now. Steiner versus, Steiner's now fought Hell's Horses. Steiner's fought, somewhat fought the Ghost Bears historically. They fought Kurita, not recently, but they fought Kurita a whole bunch in the past. I mean, I would probably say... I think Jade Falcon versus the Free Worlds League. And the reason why is because only one bird can be left standing.
Oh.
We will find out if Green Bird is stronger or if Purple Bird is stronger. There are many Jade Falcon fans who have tried to tell me that the Jade Falcons are superior to the chaos-stricken, rampaging like Free Worlds League, which is secretly just 5 birds in a trench coat with a cat hanging on next to them. But I'm gonna put my money on the Scarecrow, i.e. the Free Worlds League.
I'm gonna have to make a note, make a list of all the birds in the setting. How we get them all in one cage.
Well, the joke on the channel is the 3 Birds League. That the future is not the Star League. Jade Falcon, the Free Worlds League, and Snow Raven will unite into one faction and just meet at the middle.
I'll make a note.
The 3 Birds League. It's like one of those memes where it's like Captain Planet, where you just have like the Jade Falcons, like violence, the Free Worlds League, corruption, the Snow Ravens, warships, together we form.
Captain Bird.
Captain Bird. But yeah, like Free Worlds League versus Jade Falcon has never happened. They still share no border, so I don't really know. I mean, I guess you could have the Free Worlds League fight the fake Falcons on Terra, but those are the Pet Cemetery ones. Nobody really cares about them. I'm getting heat in the audience.
What if I tell you now that I think of it, without spoilers, we'll see something happen.
Oh, interesting.
We'll have the birds fight.
Interesting.
I right now how it's going to happen.
You have the Godzilla meme in the background as the two birds are pecking one another, and he's like, "Let them fight."
Let them fight. Yeah.
It's just Alaric staring out as he's nodding his head. Let them fight.
Yeah. Oh, Alaric. That guy.
I'm having too much fun. I would be remiss if I did not ask this question, because one fan left me a DM before I started the stream who's very passionate about it. And they wanted me to ask basically a two-parter. The first one is are we going to see more periphery mechs during the Ilkline era?
As in miniatures or new designs?
New designs. So, like, I think the last dedicated periphery mech was, like, the Hawk Wolf, which is not a very good mech.
Probably not any time in the near future. Dedicated periphery mech designs. No, I don't think so. But even then, maybe we'll see one appear somewhere from someone. I could think of the Goliath Scorpions are obvious.
Yeah.
And we've gotten some not new designs, but sort of new variants, weird stuff out of them already. The
the Raven Alliance, obviously technically, if you count them as Outworlds Alliance, the Corvus and a few are kind of already periphery mechs, but I think they're really meaning like,
yeah, I don't count them. In which case, I mean, if they're periphery, well, we got a bunch of new ones in the Rec Guide.
Yeah.
Raven Alliance, some really cool designs. But no, I can't say in the near future we'll see anything really new. It's just the nature of the thing. It's the periphery.
Yeah, I also let him know before I asked this question, before the stream, I'm like, I don't think you're going to see that. Yeah. but I will ask. The other one is, are we going to see any major spotlights on periphery stories into the future? Like, is there going to be like a big arc for one of these factions at some point?
A huge arc, I would not say. I would not say that. But we are going to see the periphery. To this point, remember that the Magistracy and the Compellings are allied.
So I wouldn't say that I wouldn't say they're allied anymore.
Okay, well,
they were allied.
In the story, we haven't gotten all the Terra-centric stories and information yet. So going back that 31, 51 to 52, when we get there, they are allied. So we're going to see the Canopians in Trial of Birthright and Ilkhan's Eyes Only. We're going to get a bunch of stuff with them, for instance. If you count the Ravens as periphery, well, because they're with the Outworlders, we're going to see them as well. How often do we really see them in a core story? The Outworlders and the Canopians are going to be part of that central story. They're not central, but they participate. The Taurians are in the back of my head.
They have such a cool potential story, and I only say that because I obviously spent like 2.5 months of my life wasted on the Taurian Concordat.
It's your Citizen Kane.
Oh no!
I mean that in a good way. I don't mean that you're going to wind up 30 years doing frozen snow peas commercials. I'm just saying you put a lot of effort into it, and it shows. I got an email just this morning. I haven't responded to it yet by an author inquiring that she saw your last, I think, interview with Brian. I think
that was 2 days ago. We had an interview with Brian,
and they're inspired to do periphery stories or a periphery story, and ask, is there any story that needs to be told there? And there isn't necessarily. Again, it's the periphery, but I would like to see something there. There are threads there. That can make good fiction. That we only have background plans. We know where they're going, but it could make good fiction.
The two strongest periphery stories, in my opinion, this is just an opinion as a fan, obviously the reunification of the Taurian Concordat, or the unification into some new state with a Taurianish name, whatever road people go. That, I think, has an enormous amount of potential because there's so many players in it. So it's not just a matter of like, oh, the Taurians and the Calderon Protectorate get together and form the Taurian Protectorate or whatever, but it's also got the issue that the Davions don't want that to happen, especially right now, and especially with so much of their border being vulnerable and containing former Taurian worlds. Then you have the Capellans who don't want that to happen. The Magistracy, I guarantee you, does not want that to happen. Because it's sort of like what I talked about before, where, nations are kind of like gravity. So once you have a gravity well show up, it starts pulling in those pieces nearby that might be a part of another person's system, right? Like, so you're going to have a lot of resistance from all of their neighbors. You'll have a lot of resistance from independent worlds, and that means a lot of conflict and a lot of interpersonal conflict and a lot of, so that's a major story that could have a real meaningful twist to it. The other one is the Marians, because of the Marians people slept on the Marians because nobody follows like the deeper lore, but the Marians were a success machine for 100 years. They had 100 years of conquest, expansion, often at the expense of their bigger, more powerful neighbors. And then as soon as someone turned attention to them, they got absolutely smashed and lost 80 years of progress in like a week. But that's still a story that is quite you have this to themselves. They view themselves as the rising power, the next great house, and then just literally some duke in Tamarind is just like, actually, you're kind of getting annoying, and he turns around and just destroys their empire.
It's the periphery.
The one periphery state that's just like, no, we're not just the periphery, we're a great house, as they proceed to lose half their empire. It's like, somebody forgot they were a periphery state.
Yep.
I'm sorry, but it's too funny. But those are, in my opinion, those are the two strongest periphery plot lines that have like meaningful potential to have bigger stories about them than just like, hey guys, we're the periphery. What are you up to? We're the periphery. That's the other problem with the periphery. It's like, what periphery story do you want to tell? Well, we're just hanging out here, being impartial, being the periphery.
But there's potential for some really interesting personal stories.
Yes.
And you did hit the nail on the head with those two. But again, we are getting the Canopians, the Outworlders, even the old bandit kings, the Barons, are figuring it. Now we're not. Yeah, they're all. So that leaves the Marians and the Taurians. And I do think there's interesting stuff there.
There's one more place, actually, but I just don't think that there's enough there at the moment. Like, there's been no groundwork done for it. The Rimworlds area. Because with Steiner falling apart, There's like, to me, it would only make sense that somebody would try to reunite. Like, I think it'd be preposterous if it was an Emeris or whatever. That's stupid. But
Right.
like, you would have a political family or an individual kind of rise in the chaos. Because again, like, empires as they're falling apart, even like, as you can see, you have the Timbuktu Collective and the Rimworld's territories that have already kind of broken away. Somebody in general is going to try to potentially rally that region into separating from the Steiners, because why would you want to stay with the Steiners? Like, like, and I'm not saying that to be I love the Lyran Commonwealth. It's just,
there's potential there. And if you look at the maps, and then we're going to get a new map in Ilkhan's Eyes Only, because last time we saw the Lyrans was in Tamar Rising, and it's just a portion of the map.
We saw a sliver. We saw a sliver of them in Dominions Divided, where it's quite obvious that Sky has broken off.
Right, and the point being, and after you get this latest one in Ilkhan's Eyes Only, you look at the map. Every time you do, there's more systems in those Rimworld's nations. More and more are breaking off.
Because, yeah, like, what's the point in being a part of House Steiner if it can't protect you and you just pay taxes into a black hole? Like,
yeah.
it's like, every Steiner fan just wants to shank me, but I'm just telling the truth.
Yeah. Trillion has 99 problems.
I feel so bad for Trillion. I actually do. Like, so many people grief on her too, because I hate to say it, some people believe that she's Melissa or she's responsible for what Melissa II did. I'm like, this person had nothing to do with that.
Like, no, she got left holding the bag.
She's the bag holder, man. She's got sworn into office and everyone's like, yeah, I hope you're ready. Ready for what? I hope you're ready. So much blame gets thrown around. I'm like, but how? What do you think she can do? The nation is bankrupt. She should hire mercenaries. With what money? She can't pay them. I'm sorry.
No, that's the situation.
So we've got from Grand Potato, who says Anastasia Kerensky for Ilkhan. That's definitely a comment.
Yeah.
We've got from Besker, I literally showed up in time to ban Ray for saying the bad word. I can tell Randall I banned Ray today. Yeah, because Besker's out in PAX Australia right now. So let it be known, Randall has not been banned yet, but unfortunately Ray Arrastia is being banned from the channel. We've got Grand Potato again, who says, Theodore was like, well, the more you F around, the more you find out. And then from Besker one more time, the story that needs to be told is the murder mystery. Who murdered Caesar O'Reilly's wife? That's the funniest story in Battletech. He comes out to the public. We're going to do an investigation to find out who killed my wife.
I'm thinking of that 4-panel comic strip that ends with the KGB pulling the bear out of the woods. You know what I mean.
I have always been a rabbit. I've been a rabbit my whole life.
Yeah.
It's so nakedly obvious he killed his wife. He's like, wow, guys, I just want the public to know that we're going to bring whoever's responsible to this for justice. It's like, oh, are you now? What's he going to get promoted to Caesar?
You know what we need? What we need is a Shrapnel article that is a review of a documentary of the whole story of the wife's murder and the search for the.
Oh no! And it's
so
like,
you can sum that crap up in just a couple pages.
Oh no! It's just like, who is the one really responsible? It was reported that safe agents were actually inside the Marian hegemony at this time. Did the Free Worlds League kill Caesar O'Reilly's wife in revenge? Is Nicole Hallis Hughes the one who pulled the trigger?
Oh no! I just saw that comment by Tasomo.
It's good to see that. Good to see the "If I Did It" by OG. Oh no! It's
So what is "If I Did It" in Latin?
oh no! That is the perfect name if somebody does that in Shrapnel. If I Did It, but in Latin. Oh, that's terrible. Well, welcome to the podcast. By the way, welcome to the. Tell people they're crazy to come on here.
It's the thing about the setting. There's so many fun breadcrumbs everywhere.
It's everywhere.
Yeah.
It's like I was mentioning, like when I did the Warhammer 2C video. When I talked to one of, like, in Discord, there's tons of people, and I just asked one of your fact checkers, I'm like, yeah, I can't find out where the Warhammer 2C comes from. He's like, it comes from Sheridan, and that just opened this can of worms that just spilled everywhere. I was like, oh, but that means this, and that means this, and that means it's like, and you just go down this horrifying rabbit hole and you don't emerge from it. You just keep going. It's just crazy to think about that you can unfold, like, whether it be new plot lines or even just investigating something or tethering events together, you can unfold it by just one small factoid obscurely from like 27 something or 28 something, and you're like, oh, but that leads to this, which leads to this, which is tied to this, which is a part of this.
Yeah.
Let's see here. It's Seafikirit. Seafikirit, I guess, would be the name for it. That's interesting, though. Yeah, no. So yeah, I think right now, even though the Hinterlands kind of ties Steiner to it, I think the only major house that doesn't have it's ironic actually, because the two houses that kind of have the least exposure at the moment in terms of the actual houses are Davion and Steiner.
Yeah.
Isn't that ironic? When you actually think about it, like the two ones that have the least kind of like immediately going on in terms of novels or plot progression at the moment for the core houses themselves.
Yeah.
Are Davion and Steiner. I literally just realized that just now. I'm like, wait a second.
Yeah.
If you asked me that in 1994, I would have been like, impossible. It's impossible. So we'll ask some clan-centric questions, because I think we've mostly asked questions so far about the inner sphere and periphery, if you've still got a few minutes.
I'm in for the long haul.
You heard that here, folks. No, I'm just kidding. But like, if we take a look at the clan stuff, obviously GE Chistu's Falcons, I don't mean to speak for broad groups of people, but I think they've been pretty popular in terms of what's happened with the Jade Falcons. What transformations are you like? Are we going to see a lot of the other clans go through some major transformations as well? Like, are we going to see major changes to the Hell's Horses? Are we going to see major changes to the Spirit Cats? Are we going to see major changes to the Raven Alliance and the Rosselhig Dominion? Real clans, not like the three that are on Terra, like the actual clans. I will beat that horse to death if I have to.
Well, you're taking a stab at them, but you're actually making an interesting point. The clans that are most interesting now are the ones that are evolving or have evolved, whether they already have or they're in the process, are the most interesting. And one of the biggest hurdles we have is that a lot of both longtime fans and creatives think that it's still 30-50 when it comes to the clans, and it's not. Hell, the whole point of the Wars of Reaving is they all got kicked out because they were changing. They were tainted.
They weren't clan enough.
Exactly. So yes, we're going to see changes in them. I think there are some that I still don't have my head wrapped around, but some of my developers do have some directions. But without getting into specifics, the answer is yes. We will see more evolution with them. My hope is that for fans of those clans, whether in general the clans or specific clans, that we do no harm, that we don't evolve in ways that turn you off from your factions. But we will see evolution in most, if not all of them.
Because like it's also interesting because if you look at the great houses, like, and this is just me, you know, realistically we've just had basically a conversation for the last hour, and it's a lot of fun. But for me, the interesting thing about the great houses is that one of the biggest critiques I have of the early fiction that's not sourcebook related for the Free Worlds League is they portray them basically as flawed Davions. When, if you read the sourcebooks, they're super not flawed Davions. Like, it's a corrupt mafia state. Like, if you read the sourcebook, you're like, these people are basically like, you know, even the Mariks got their start as pirates. Like, you know, the Mariks didn't start, like, yeah, they were nobles on Earth at some point, but the actual state that formed into the Free Worlds League was a band of pirates. Like, you know, they actually are part of the reason why the Taurian Concordat exists, because they were raiding the Taurians. You know, or they were raiding the assets of the Calderons. And so, like, you take a look at, like, I like the idea that the houses become more distinct from one another with time. I would not really care for them to all be, you know, just a different flavor of House Davion who happens to oppose them for some reason. Like, I want to see Steiner become even more distinct. I want to see Marik become more distinct, and Davion become more distinct, and Liao and Kurita, you know, like, you know, instead of coming closer together in terms of how they operate, becoming further apart. And like, and that doesn't mean fighting each other all the time. I just talk about like how, like, you know, how they perceive themselves, what they're doing, how they behave, what their priorities are. I want to see the same thing for the clans, because one of the biggest things that historically is kind of a criticism is, yeah, you've got Nova Cats and Ghost Bears who were kind of weird, but like most of the clans, you take a look at a Jaguar, you take a look at a Jade Falcon, they're different, but are they? You know, like, and but also, you have so much
totem in a different uniform, but they're essentially the same faction.
That's one reason why, like, when Smoke Jaguar died, and I was a Smoke Jag fan, I was just like, it's not that big a deal, because it's not distinct. It's not actually, like, you know, it's, yeah, their battles are distinct, and some of, like, how much of an asshole they are is distinct, but, like, the setting hasn't been robbed of clan culture. Like, you know, it's still everywhere.
It's like you lost the logo. You know?
Yeah, like,
whereas with the great houses, it's more than that. I still feel one of the things that I say for casual fans and for bringing new people in, I think the logos are important. I think the colors and the visuals are important, and you pick your faction based on that initial draw. Okay, so I think they're very important. But you lose the Smoke Jaguars, you know, unless you're a super diehard fan, you just lost the logo. You just shift over here.
Yeah, it's like, I'm Jade Falcon now. Most of the, I like, again, I was a Smoke Jag even as a kid, and like after they died, I had one other friend who was a Smoke Jag fan. He's like, well, I play Jade Falcon now. He repainted his specs to Jade Falcon. It's like,
and you hit the nail on the head that is one of the directions that we are going, to make sure that they are distinct factions.
But the thing is what's interesting about the clans is the inner sphere, they're never going to evolve outside of being monarchies, because it wouldn't make sense for them to stop being monarchies. Like, the Free Worlds League becoming a legit democracy, I know there's a small group of people who would really want that to happen. That would be awful. That, like, you know, that would kill a lot of the distinctness of the faction. Ironically, you know, making them all monarchies might seem like they lack distinction, but no, the royal houses are kind of a major component in how they're different from each other.
And but you're touching on something that I've given a lot of thought, actually, is that we are evolving the clans. What about the houses? the difference there is that they are distinct, whereas the clans are usually just, that's the faction, the clans. They don't have the distinctness, so it's not where we're going to see the houses. We're going to see the houses go through things, but not change their fundamental core, which makes them what they are. And again, I don't think we're going to see a change in the fundamentals of the clans. Just make them distinct beyond, the meme level stuff, beyond just their logo. We're Falcons, so we have to name everything like bird related.
But to be fair, what I was going to mention though was that the clans, because they're not as distinct, they have an open door to be whatever they want. One clan could try going the road of becoming a house almost, having basically a monarchy. Another one could become a real democracy. Another one could be some type of like warrior-based system similar to the current. Like you have so many directions you can actually take each one of these, and it would be realistic regardless. Like there's nothing really holding them back. Like, oh well, the nobles wouldn't allow that, or the public would be mad about this, or something like that. Like in the clans, they can just change. Like, and not, like, it has to make sense. I'm not saying that you could just, like, this clan's a pacifist clan now, because I say so. Like, that's not what I mean. What I mean, like, the road is much more open to them in terms of what they can become than the great houses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But that's just me being crazy. I'm just out of my mind.
No, not for that.
So, Besker says, Star Adder looming over Steel Viper, patiently waiting to finish the job. I love Star Adder. They're the only clan we're saving out of the entire homeworlds. Edward Cooper says, Scorpion Empire lore when? And you know what? Just before you answer that, I have been stunned by the number of people who actually are, like, super in love with the Scorpion Empire. Like, it's one of the most common comments I see. People like, when are we getting Scorpion Empire stuff? So, are we going to see more for the Scorpion Empire?
Yes, but
I always tell people, though, I'm like, you have no idea how far away they are. Like, they're next to House Steiner. I'm like, next to is a really generous term that you're using there.
Yes, but they are periphery.
They're just far away. They're not even regular periphery. They're like deep periphery. They
are key to a major plot line.
Oh, interesting. So you heard that, everyone. We will see scorpions.
Yeah. And I'm not just saying in the future. I'm saying they're already tied in with a major plot line. There's been hints already.
Nice. I think that's very cool.
Yeah.
Then one more from Besker.
Interesting clans. Again, what we're saying is initially when we got the clans, it was just different logos, different totems. But I think they were the first ones that they threw some really unique stuff in there with the Seekers and the Venom and all that stuff. By now, we've got more personality than that in all the other clans, but that, and then the fact that they were one of the guys in the Wars of Reading that were abjured and made
survived
their own way outside of the inner sphere. They didn't come running to the inner sphere. They just set up their own shop and kept going. So I do find them interesting. It's exactly what you said. They're too far away. And therefore just not part of any of the major storylines.
It's sort of like the problem that the homeworld clans had too. They're just super far away. Like, how do you involve them? I don't know. They're 6 months away, or they're a year away in the course of the clans. I think the Scorpions are 6 months away approximately. They're about a halfway point between. They're far away though. They're multiple jumps.
I think they're a little bit farther than halfway, but I'd have to look at the map.
But they're real far though. Like, it's not like
they're not even on the main map.
It's like it takes the better part of a year for them to show up. So like they can't even really launch a campaign, because even though like you could just write or fiat them doing a campaign, but if we look at Battletech as it's supposed to be, they require a logistics chain. How do you support a logistics chain over that huge of an area? Like, it's just not It's just not reasonable. Right. It's like, we're going to invade the territory here. It's just like, you will be pushed out. Because you will run out of bullets, you will run out of men, and then you will lose. But we've got Besker who says, Ray, what can I say to make Randall laugh today, aside from more shirtless Alaric posters? Because Ray, just letting you know, Besker was crazy enough to hand Randall and Talon, apparently, shirtless Alaric shirts.
Randall showed me all the stuff. I would have to think on it. The first thing that comes to mind is ask him about the website that was dedicated to him. Now, if he laughs, great, press it. If he turns ashen, just leave it. Walk away.
If he turns ashen, that actually means that you're supposed to press it, because now it's entertainment for you versus entertainment for him. I'm just kidding. I don't mean it. I don't mean it. But yeah, like, so we're seeing kind of the beginnings, I suspect, of the Hell Sources and the Jade Falcons evolving into something else. At least G.E. Chistu's Jade Falcons, because the Alina Mercantile League has already kind of become something else.
Which is interesting. I really find them interesting, just that as a purely mercantile, tiny faction, there's not a lot we could see from them just yet. Yeah. But I think they're interesting.
So we've got the Snow Ravens who merged with the Ravens Alliance, but we don't really know much about that, because I think there's only 2 books that kind of talk about that at all, which is, they're mentioned in like the Wars of Reaving, forming, and then we learn a little bit more about them either in Error Report 3145 or Shattered Fortress, but there's just not really any data.
It's the same situation in a way as the Rasselhaig Dominion, but worse. Because we really don't have a lot of information on them, and we have had discussions and arguments internally on what really is the deal with them. And even at this moment, we don't have it completely nailed down. However, you're going to see a lot of them in Trial of Birthright and Ilkhan's Eyes only. So we're going to be shaping up a lot of that lore as we go. I don't think, however, it's going to be as much of a shock as the Rasselhaig Dominion Civil War.
Everybody knows my opinion on the Civil War, so I'm not going to deep dive that at all. But I will say, just to quickly switch subjects for a brief aside, my favorite part of Rasselhaig lore, Ghost Bear Dominion, Rasselhaig Dominion lore, is when Kabrinsky gets cooed by the civilians. I just think that's people don't understand how funny that is to me, that these clan warriors in the middle of a war are basically ousted by a workers' strike and a couple of politicians. It's like, they're like, oh, you're going to go back out there and we're going to finish this job. And they're just like, actually, this is how it's going to be. And just...
I don't know if I want to go down that rabbit hole. It's just the idea that I think that we could buy into the setting conceit that clan society just works. And you're never going to get any guff from the laborer caste or the technicians or anything. But let's say we completely buy into that conceit. That's not what the Rasselhaig Dominion is. That's not what it is.
Nor is that what the Free Worlds League is, or the Lyran. I know that it's because it was written not recently. I think they wrote the Wolf Empire in 2010 or 2008 that the Wolf Empire appeared?
Like that.
Yeah, where they initially wrote that the Wolf Empire liberated, more or less is popular among the populace of the former Marik Commonwealth. I'm like, that's just not how that works. That's like occupying the Balkans and being like, yes, now that our army is here, the Serbs, the Croats, they're all cheering for us. It's like, bro, you'd be getting car bombed in a week.
Well.
I'm just saying that, it is what's in the literature. You can't, it's not, and again, nobody at Catalyst right now wrote it, but, you just sit there, you're like, That's just not how, like...
There were so many issues we found when we were building post-Ill Clan. Things that just didn't make sense. Sometimes we just let that lie, and
because there's only so much you can do about it.
Nobody will notice. But some we really leaned into because, okay, this doesn't make sense. So we're going to spotlight it and lead it to its natural conclusion. And that's one of the things I say when I ask for give us some patience, because we get it. We can't just immediately sprint to the finish line of that thought or that arc or whatever. Let it play out, and hopefully it then becomes satisfying.
Yeah, like, and again, like, I fully support that for the most part. Just to be clear, I again, like, I'm talking about something that Catalyst did not do, so I'm talking about something from a very long time ago. But because
WizKids, but I'm also talking about things that Catalyst did, and it could be stuff I run into now where if let's say a writer gets an assignment and you have these many words for this section, and here's what's going to happen in that section. The writer is creative, and they're going to put fun stuff in there. Some of the stuff may be really weird, and not all of it gets vetted. It's just buried in a line there.
Well, that's just the thing, right? That's just the thing, right? Like, But yeah, like, I remember the first time I read about, like, the Wolf Empire in a source book in, like, I think it was like 2011 or 12, and I read the line. It's like, yes, and then they pacified the region. And I was like, you just see me looking at this book like, am I going to keep following this? Because this doesn't make any sense.
Right. Yeah.
We're going to occupy the least occupiable people in the central part of the inner sphere. I'm like, interesting. That's a choice. Like, their own government can't occupy them. What makes you think you can?
A lot of the stuff from the 2000s seemed to be there seemed to be a lot of trends, and it wasn't Battletech. I'm saying Battletech was subject to these bigger creative trends.
Yep.
Like, one of them is the mystery box type of story where let's shake things up, but let's not really think about it. Let's just do it and see how the audience reacts, and we'll feed each other back and forth. But you paint yourself into a corner with that.
Exactly.
Better off that, if anything, how about these are these 5 possibilities, and then we could drive to whichever one is going to be the most fun and exciting based on that relationship. But not, I don't know. It's no secret now to the Battletech fans how many I don't knows we got from earlier eras that we really do not have answers for, that we've had to create answers for major plot points because of that mystery box thing. There's also the idea of not necessarily plot twist, but to create, what's the words I'm looking for? To create like a really contrary story point, like out of nowhere. This makes no sense. Therefore, it's very exciting and improbable, and you're going to get lots of great outcomes and aftermath for it. But you're still tripping over the fact that it makes no sense and you can't explain it.
Yeah, like, you've told this story, but there's no yeah, that's great that you told this story, but there's no way that it could have happened. So,
right. Right. And I'm not even talking about magical technology or any of that. I'm talking about interpersonal motivations, whether on a factional scale or units or individuals.
You're just describing Alaric. I just want you
Alaric is currently the center of the universe, whether we like it or not.
Oh, I know.
Same page, right?
I'm just saying, though. What character is he this book? He's a character. That doesn't tell me what type of character he is this book.
And Anastasia's worse.
Yes.
And in these cases, we're just like, okay, fine. From this moment on, we have the reins on these characters, and we're going to be consistent moving forward.
Oh yeah, like I expect Alaric to be a completely different character come Trial by Birthright, but not because like I think that's like, oh, it's because Catalyst is just for, it's like, no, because he's a non-character. Like you can't, like he, like, up until this point his personality changes in every single book. Like he's and not like in a character growth way, like as in like, like a Joker way, where like he's just this character this time. He's just this. It's like, and I knew, like, I would not criticize CGL at this point for putting forward him in a new light, because like, what are you gonna do? Like he's not a character. he's an idea that mutated into a malignant thing. And again, I'm not trying to run over anybody. That's just what happened, right? So
yeah. But when you get to Trial of Birthright, he is not the central character, but he is a major character throughout the book. We get inside his head a few times, but what you'll find is that he should be consistent with the last few times we saw. Obviously, Hour of the Wolf, we had one cameo in Question of Survival.
yes.
I think. He was in a couple prior to Hour of the Wolf novellas or something.
I hope he's not consistent with what's the name? Bonfire of Worlds, because that was just uncomfortable. That was so uncomfortable.
All right, not going that far back, but we're not messing with his history. We're just going to be consistent moving forward, and maybe even see character growth.
And that's more.
I won't say maybe. The character needs to be interesting because of the position he's in.
Yeah. I do wish you guys best of luck in terms of pulling that off. It's like...
We are absolutely trying.
So I do have a question here from the audience, from Les James, and he asks, does Ray think, and I only ask this one because I know he would want me to ask this one, does Ray think New Jaguar is truly redeemable? Can they actually be made interesting?
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah, I do.
I suspected that would be your answer, but that's still interesting. Besker says, I can outrun Randall if things go wrong, which will be entertaining in another form.
All right, let me know what his response is.
And then Brian Christina just donates $5. Thank you, Brian Christina. I appreciate. Oh yeah, Ray, clan society just works. Fucked. Incest is just a social construct. Oh no. Oh no. So in the in the Blood of Kerensky trilogy, in the first book, Phelan is feeling awful. He's having like this horrible like crisis moment in, like, I think it's in the first half of the book. I bring this up because people were mad about something that came up with about Vogt about earlier this year, and I said, well, Vogt is hardly somebody who you should be looking towards for guidance anyway. I'm pretty sure he told Phelan Kell that like that was just a social construct, and we looked it up on stream in the book, and lo and behold, he's like, well, Phelan, I know you're really uncomfortable with the clans being like incestuous and weird, but have you considered that that's just not that big a deal? And he's clearly telling Phelan this to make Phelan feel better. Like, I want to point out, like, it's clearly being done to help Phelan cope with the horrible life that he is now going to potentially live. But when you read that line, you're like, oh,
I think I can say this about both. Like many interesting historical figures, there's what he's known for. He's known as a brilliant strategic commander. He whipped the Comguards into shape. He beat the unbeatable clans at Tukian. And I think you should look beyond that with him. He's a very interesting, complicated character, but I don't necessarily think he's all that likable. Now, I love him because he shot what's-her-face in the face.
Oh, yeah, Mindu Waterly. He shoots Waterly in the face, 100%.
And then if he had completely disappeared at that point, I think things would have gone much better for Comstar at that point.
Yeah, like he's just as responsible for killing Comstar as Waterly is. Like, because like when he chose to be like, we're going to be secular now, it's like, you just sit there, you're like, that, like, what if the majority of the organization doesn't believe you, though? Like, how's that gonna go? And we found out. But no, that is still...
The trick played on Comstar was Theodore handing them Steiner. Frederick Steiner.
Yep.
He planted a bomb there that destroyed Comstar.
You're entirely correct. It's one reason why I personally don't like Vogt. It's not that I think he's a bad character or anything, but just I'm obviously a Comstar fan, so I don't really like Vogt very much, because when you take the 1,000-mile high look at the situation, you're like, yeah, he killed Comstar. He's just as responsible as the person he shot. It's just as responsible. The whole word of Blake, the Blakist era, it's, yes, Mindu Waterley and Thomas Marik and Demona, they're all responsible too, of course, but Vogt enabled that to happen by the actions he took.
I think we are on the same page on a lot of things regarding Comstar.
Not everything, though.
Not everything.
I still think it's really funny though, like, because like that became a meme on the channel for like 6 months, and it was just like anytime Vogt came up in a discussion, somebody would just be like, "But is that just a social construct?" We had Herbert Bees was in the chat when we had the quote up on the screen, and he said the funniest thing. He's just like, yeah, the beginning of what he proposes actually contradicts his conclusion. He literally disproves himself in his own argument. It's so stupid, but I love it.
I'm not sure how to read this name. AMPG.
Amp. Yeah, we just call him Amp.
Notes that folk didn't beat all the clans on Tukian. Well, no, because nobody beats Wolf. We just know that's one of the...
To be fair, he lost to the Ghost Bears. He did lose to the Bears, but unfortunately the Bears also have had a lot of plot armor. They've just not been central to the story. So the reason why people don't complain as much about Ghost Bear plot armor, and some people do, just to be clear, is because when Ghost Bear wins, it's usually not something that's going to change the nature of the story. When Wolf wins, it means that your faction is about to get run over by a train, and it's going to fundamentally alter the story going forward.
That's the sentiment against Davion. Those are three of the more popular factions: the Bears, the Wolves, the Fed Sons. But the Fed Sons and the Wolves, their plot armor wrecks other factions. The Ghost Bears just stand still and take it.
Yeah,
they just stand still and take it and keep standing.
Yeah, I mean, like, the thing is, Davion's not had plot armor for 20 plus years now, though. Like, really, the end of the FedCom Civil War is kind of the last of Davion's plot armor. You know, and it's just like everything for the Fed Sons after that has been them just taking it on the chin. The Wolves have never received that. I know there's a blurb or two in like the Jihad books where they're just like, yeah, but you know, Wolf had a real tough time. It's like, yeah, not depicted anywhere, and it never slowed them down. Absolutely. Yeah, they lost to the Word of Blake. Did they lose anything for losing to them? No. Oh, so it's not really losing.
Right.
The Fed Sons surviving in the face of Kuritan superiority is plot armor, says Lorcan Nagel. You know what? I actually became a fan. I actually used to dislike the Federated Sons in the early 2000s, because I felt, you know, because for me, I was one of those people who's like, I cut everything off at 3067, and up until 3067, yes, Davion plot armor is basically an impenetrable shield, but when I started to get into the Dark Age, and, you know, over the last 15 years, getting into the later portions of the lore, I came to appreciate the Davions as a faction. They're one of my favorite factions now, but they're not my favorite faction for their golden era. They're one of my favorite factions because of the downward, like, you know, what's happened, how they've had to persevere, the struggle, the legitimate struggles that they've had to go through with poor leadership, the Palmyra disaster. Like, you know, I found all those things fascinating. So I always thought it was really like, you know, unfortunate, at least in my view, when everyone's like, we got to reverse those things. I'm like, no, those are, this is grit. This gives angst. This gives purpose. This is, you know, it gives the faction something to strive for, something to reconquer. This is what you want. You don't want them to just be like, and then they defeated the Draconis Combine. It's like, what does that mean?
Right. And that's everything that happened in the last couple of years was trying to walk that tightrope of it was more about them surviving, not so much beating the Draconis Combine.
Yeah.
And if it weren't for all the internal politics in the Combine, it would not have happened.
Yeah, like, you know, Toranaga is a better commander than Julian Davion is. Like, if it had just been Toranaga versus Julian Davion with equivalent forces, even if neither side was arriving, so you just had an equivalent battlefield, you know, Julian's head would have been rolling down the steps of the Federated Sun's capital. I knew it wasn't going to happen, but I joked with people forever. I'm like, look, after Toranaga wins, he's just going to decapitate Julian Davion on the steps of the palace.
And that's the thing that I see, which I like, I appreciate. He wasn't beaten by Julian or Eric. He was beaten by Yuri.
Yuri outplayed him. Yes. Yeah. And that's what made me appreciate Yuri. Like, she's... I have a very low opinion of most of the House Lords at the moment. I don't really like most... I like the factions. I like a lot of their storylines. But, like, I think Julian's okay, and I like Yuri. I feel bad for Trillian, but I don't have much of an opinion beyond that, because we've not seen enough from Trillian for me to... Yeah, she's been in from some stories before, which she didn't have power, you know, but we haven't seen a proper novel or source book that really focuses in on, like, what is happening with the Archon of this failed state. You know, and I don't really personally like Denai. I think she's a popular character, but I don't really like her very much. And Daoshin is in his last act. I actually like Daoshin, but I strongly suspect for some reason, based off of a Tuesday Newsday, that I don't think that Daoshin is going to be the Chancellor of the Compelling Confederation for a particularly longer moment in time. I know that is a hot take. So, and then of course I famously despise the current Captain General. So, but that doesn't, you know, like, but I appreciated Yuri as a character because of her ruthlessness in displaying what it actually takes to be a leader in the inner sphere. What people don't understand is it's not just about like, oh, well, she killed her best general. It's like, yeah, and there's going to be consequences for doing that. But that she didn't kill him for what's best for her army. She killed him for what's best for her staying on Luthien and not being replaced. Like, right. You know, and the reason why I like Julian is because of partially is because of his rivalry with Eric Sandoval, because he's in a similar position to Yuri, but he can't make the decision that Yuri did, who just had the other guy taken out. If Eric dies, his state is going to fly into complete ruin. So he has to walk this tightrope, you know, going forward, where he's like, what am I going to do with Eric, right? Like, that, to me, that's great. That's great. I love that. That's what I like about the setting.
Yeah, exactly.
She kills her best general while serving the state and hanging on to her humanity. She's super cool. I don't think Yuri has held on to her humanity. I don't think that's true.
See, Yuri has to be more than human. She has to be the coordinator.
Yeah. Being the coordinator is not an enviable position. Mm-hmm. No, we don't have a Captain General. We have a placeholder because no one wants this mess at this time. It's at the joke. It's like, why did none of the other dukes make a play for the throne? They're like, nobody wants the mess.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to be the Captain General. We'll just let Nicole have it. But there's a crisis and she can't handle it. The anxiety will be fine. She's trembling in public. Brian Davion says, hey, Big Red must be the only person I know who likes the Julian Eric thing. Honestly, it feels forced. Didn't feel forced to me. On the bright side of things, being the coordinator means whatever you do is right. up until you're assassinated by your successor. But I actually know plenty of other people, just to be very clear, Brian, but it's probably because people, who like my opinion on stuff tend to show up in chat or in my Discord and whatnot. But there's a ton of people who I know who like the Federated Sun storyline. So I'm sure that there's just going to be differences of opinion on any storyline. Like, I know people who think Nicole is the smartest leader in the world. You can come away with very different takes based off of different life experiences and based off of different priorities.
I would venture to guess that Brian and I know each other without meaning to condescend or sound insulting. I just think there's a bias there because I could say as a Davion fan, I don't like it. But I was part of that story, greenlit the story, and there are reasons for it. I don't think it came out as forced. I just don't like it because it's my faction, and I wanted, there were people that were disappointed with that whole storyline because the Davians should have completely beaten the Kuritans, gone to their capital, taken it over, and wiped out the entire faction. Because Davian fans have been waiting 25 years for, some of that bad luck to turn. But again, that's not ultimately interesting. So I think there's a bit of bias there. Like, can we just please take a breath for this faction? We managed to take back our capital and survive. Why are we piling in some new bad stuff on top? Because we need to have some interesting things happening.
Because otherwise Davion is going to sit there with nothing to do.
Right. Now, does it feel forced? That's a valid opinion. Some people definitely feel that way, and some don't.
I'm one of the ones that don't, just because I see the people in politics and Battletech as being when you're at that level, a lot of those people are going to be extraordinarily ambitious and self-serving. That's just.
And I will say, and this may be one of those things where there's intent, but it doesn't make it to the page. I think that rivalry, that feud, is more one-sided. I don't feel that it's anything that Julian is pushing or engaging in just yet. I feel it's mostly Eric feeling that
he was there during the bad times.
Yes, and then Julian sort of took it because it was put on him that this was his legacy, his thing that he needed to take hold of.
You know what? It's actually very similar to Alexander Hasek, who just takes it to another level. Because Alexander feels the same way. It's just he's not like Eric, who's got a bigger brain, to be quite frank, and is more reasonable. So, like, Alexander Hasek himself is basically just where Eric is, but he has less self-control, he has a bigger ego, and he's got a lower IQ, so he's going to act out in more severe ways.
If anything, I'd say that Hasek is more loyal to Julian. He's just he screwed up. He went off grid.
I will invade the Taurian Concordat and verify centuries of paranoia.
Dude. No.
I actually love Alexander Hasek just because of what a complete train wreck that campaign was. My scourge will run over this entire area. Bro, they got a regiment. What do you got? I have 2 battalions. It's like, I'm not good at math, but I don't think you are either.
No.
Lorcan Eagle says, that day you were demoted from Regent to Prince's Champion was the worst day of your life. But to Julian, it was Tuesday. The Hasek's an idiot and a fool. Yeah, it's wonderful. We need more of them, but not as house lords, just as underlings. So here's another question for you. Just as we're reaching near the end of the stream, because 2 hours is kind of the usual cutoff time for these. But
okay.
So when it comes to underlings, are we going to they're kind of they're kind of the ones who drive the stories in a lot of ways. They're the ones who create the problems that need to be addressed. or have to handle the problems on behalf of the bigger characters. Are we going to see a more spread out and even view of like an importance on these underlings? Like, there's not really a lot of important characters in the Compelling Confederation right now, except for Daoshin and Deny. You know, in the Free Worlds League, you've got Nicole and I guess Trenton. You know, like other than that, like, yes, Fontaine is there, but he's not gotten a lot of spotlight. Even though I will say he is legitimately the smartest leader in the entire read. Everyone else is sitting there with a low IQ. He's just sitting there like, yeah, this seems really dumb and we should be more aggressive. Shut up, Fontaine. You don't know what you're talking about. but like, to me, it just seems like a lot of these dukes and counts and like lower nobles, I don't like, you know, we look at Steiner. I think we've got Ludwig is the only kind of main character outside of
more of him.
But are we going to see more of these types of characters become established too?
Yes. It just goes back to the whole getting enough fiction flowing. Yes, I mean, the Lyrians, for example, outside of Trillion, then you have Ludwig, you have, I'm blanking on his name right now.
Oh, it starts with an R. You're thinking of Adam Steiner's only remaining descendant.
Yeah.
Roderick.
We have another character that's just been mentioned a few times. We'll see more of her. She's a Kelswa. I think Katarina, something with a K. Kelswa. We have earmarked. In the Draconis Combine, we really need to rebuild.
Yeah, because Toranog is dead.
Oh, and there's more deaths coming.
Oh no! Oh
so
no!
We need to rebuild the cast, and that's part of it. Some people get shown the door while other characters come up in some upcoming stories. But no, that is one of the core things we're working towards, because honestly, there's not a lot we could do with the big movers and shakers. We need characters on the ground, and we need characters a tier or two below the House Lords that are doing the real big political, getting their hands dirty. So no, we absolutely need more of those characters. I don't think it was mentioned today, but like, nobody has any heirs. These are the last of the House Lords. What's going on there? Well, everybody forgot.
Well, I mean,
it was a forgotten piece of the story.
To be fair to you, there are more Mariks in the Free Worlds League than there are regular citizens. So you can just if Nicole dies and you don't want to use any of the established ones, you could be like, well, this is Larry Marik. He's a
right. I'm not worried about the Free Worlds League. We've got potential Captain Generals there.
Everyone can be Captain General.
Yeah, we could do like a monthly club, right? Different Captain General every month. They'll be fine.
I love House Marik is like there's a ability in Crusader Kings 3 called A Weed in a Garden.
Mm-hmm.
Where you go off and you can seduce people and like you just have more progeny, and so like you just sit there at the Free Worlds League. It's like, well, yeah, we're gonna need a Marik character. It's like, yeah, which of the 4,500 on this planet do you want to use?
So I could say out of the 5 great houses, we actually have plans for 3 heirs already, and you know, some of those directions are obvious. One of them is going to be
Julian.
Completely out of the blue, and I don't mean out of the blue like, oh, they have an illegitimate child. I don't mean that. I just mean it's going to take a turn that's not expected. And then, you know, the Compelling Confederation, people forget this weird buried fact, but the early from Elias Liao and his immediate successors, they were so prodigious that 1% of the population of the Compelling Confederation are Liaos, are related to the ruling family. That's absurd and insane, but there it is. So we could literally manufacture one there if we needed.
It's the same, like in the Free Worlds League and in the Compelling Confederation, you just have a huge percentage of people who descend from the actual like house. Like, you know, you look at their genealogy, even of listed character genealogies, and it's just like, bleh, like it's like this one had 8 children and this one had 20. You're just like,
yeah,
they're everywhere.
But you know, looking at everything there, it's again the Lyrans that have the short end of the stick, I think.
Yeah, I mean, like after Trillian and Roderick, you've got Ludwig. There's just no other Steiners really out there. Like, I mean, I'm sure there's some distant cousins and stuff like that, but
it's okay because there's always Vedette Brewer.
You know what? Vedette Brewer is going to win the setting. I'm telling you right now, he will become. He is headed towards becoming Lord of the Star League. I'm telling you right now, Vedette Brewer. Everything is just an obstacle to his grand victory.
You know, that would be a fun poll. I wonder where we would do it. Do you prefer Alaric as Star-Lord or Vedette Brewer?
I think Brewer would actually win just on the power of the Alaric hatred. Just on the power of how much people hate Alaric. Every Clan Wolf fan would be in the background like, no, you can't do this. You can't do this.
And by his track record, he'd last, 6 months before he's chased out of Terra?
And then you'd found a state near Terra and call it Star League 2. This is my Star League. It's the 4th Star League. It's better than the 3rd Star League.
4 times better.
4 times better. No, I love Vedette Brewer. I can't wait to see more with him. He's basically like everything I love about a Free Worlds League character, but trapped in the Lyran Commonwealth. So like, I just love, he's corrupt. He's just a money man in the background. I'm like, yes, we need more Vedette Brewer. The Vesper Marches, he will outlive the Vesper Marches, he will outlive the Lyran Commonwealth, and he will outlive the 3rd Star League.
I think those characters are interesting. They shake up the setting. I think having Banson die off screen on the page in a little sentence.
We don't know that Banson's dead.
We do.
Oh, no.
Because he would have been great to bring back, and he's dead. I dug through it, and...
Because I thought it was mentioned that he was just taken to a black site and never heard from again. But I didn't realize that they actually pulled the trigger on him.
Right. It's confirmed somewhere else in a source book, and not the same source book.
Oh, okay.
But because he would have been great for us to have our hands on that character. Super rich guy with a huge ego doing whatever the hell he wants. That would have been great.
But you know what? This is what happens when you challenge celestial wisdom.
Well, yeah.
So, is there any other characters that we've seen before that we haven't seen for a while that you think might be coming back?
I would have to say probably, because nothing immediately jumps to mind. But probably.
So Apollyon, he's going to be back any day. No. The word of Blake shall return and be glorious in their victory.
Well, I'll put it this way: a huge part of Word of Blake got away.
Yes.
To this day, we, feel their influence, but they have as much chance as the homeworlds. They were out there. We don't know what's happened. Probably not. And I'm sure the opinions range on how much you feel about the setting is serious fiction or pulp fiction.
I mean, obviously we don't see that. I think there's huge amounts that could be done with various Blakist groups in Battletech still that could be valid, but that's just not where the story's going. So,
Right.
so but I think there's a real demand from fans, which I was shocked by, to be quite honest. I thought that because it's been so long since Comstar was relevant to the story.
Right.
Even myself, when I was running the channel, I was just beginning. I thought, nobody really cares. And what I found out through just social media, like in general, like I don't usually frequent the Reddit, but they had a Reddit post that got like 1,000 upvotes of someone just being like, "I'm sad that there's no Blakist or Comstar faction." I was like, "Oh wow!" Like on that platform, that's what's the word I'm looking for here? Very high. Normally, like a big post over that gets like 300 posts or 300 upvotes. So I know when I did during the Kickstarter, I was running streams and stuff like that, and people asked me in mass to do a video being like, "You should, like, the case for Comstar," and I'm just like, "Oh boy." I actually put this up as a joke. I didn't think people would actually seriously be interested in this. And all I found is that there is a very large appetite for them, and they just don't seem to be sated. Now, that's just me. That doesn't mean that the story's not going to accommodate them. So I've told people this repeatedly now. I'm like, don't get your hopes up, guys. I don't think you're going to get anything. But I think there's a ton that could be done to have Blakist factions in some way, but they're never going to be Comstar. They can't. Well, you could never have something that's like, oh, they control the communications network. That's impossible.
That's an interesting point, and that's what I'm really curious about. Because if you have a faction die, like Comstar, like Word of Blake, but I'm sorry. Other than Comstar or Word of Blake, I can understand what the loss to the setting is, but it's kind of like what we said. Jaguar dies off, you still have the clans. It's just a logo that's gone.
Yeah.
But Comstar Word of Blake went through so many changes that I wonder if somebody says, "I miss Comstar, I miss Word of Blake," what in particular are they missing?
So
are they missing the secret society under everything, running the HPGs? Do they miss the over the top bad guys in the jihad, bombing the hell out of everything wantonly? Do they miss the religious flavor behind the faction? What are the things that are missed?
I can actually tell you a little bit based off of, I did a poll a year ago during the Kickstarter when I asked people what they were missing, and it was really scarily close for like all of the different flavors. Because I asked people, like, do you miss the Word of Blake? Do you miss secular Comstar? Do you miss like clan invasion Comstar? Like, I kind of gave people options. I even added the Blessed Order. So I had the Blessed Order, the Word of Blake, secular Comstar, and this is not a scientific poll, but I did get 3,000 people to respond to it. And the fascinating one is the version of Comstar that was the least missed was secular Comstar. The least number of people cared that the white hats of the setting, like the good guys were missing, and everyone else was really close. Meaning except for the Blessed Order was notably smaller than the Word of Blake or pre clan invasion Comstar. Those were the two that got the most pull. But the one that with the least pull, which shocked the hell out of me, because I assumed everybody would pick secular Comstar. I assumed that
I'm surprised by that, because that's the playable faction, right? Whereas for me, it's the Succession Wars pre-clan Comstar, the Blessed Order, because they were so inherent to the setting. You feel their loss,
their presence everywhere.
But nobody's saying that's my faction. That's just the setting. Something missing from the setting. So I hear people saying, because I want my faction, that's the secular Comstar with the Comguard. It's very interesting.
Again, this is just something I ran. It's not a scientific poll. It's just based off of who sees it and responds to it. But the real shock to me was I saw secular Comstar fall in 4th place. I was like, oh wow. For me, my favorite version of Comstar is actually the Blessed Order from the Dark Age, which.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, confused them.
My second favorite is the pre clan invasion, And my third favorite is the Word of Blake. And I don't really appreciate secular Comstar all that much myself. I tend to be more of Word of Blake and Blessed Order. I mean, I don't mind the secular, Comstar. I had a ComGuard. I flipped. Is the funny part. Is like when I was a kid, I was like, religious Comstar's stupid. That doesn't make any sense. Like 20 years later, I'm like, yeah, the secular Comstar sucks. Why would you do that? You should be on the religious train. But again, it's not a scientific poll, right? Like, you'd have to do a lot more research that is layered by like actual people who do marketing to find out what people are missing. But to me, I just miss them being basically a combination of ROM and religious fanatics.
Yeah.
The Blessed Order was amazing, says Besker. So yeah, like that's. And I was surprised to find out that that there was a ton of Comstar people in my audience. I didn't realize that. I just assumed like, well, they've been dead for 10 years. Nobody cares. Well, I was wrong. The lack of any Blakeists has killed my interest in Ilclan, says Tuppy. Secular Comstar was a playable faction, but we loved the Blessed Order, and Secular allowed us to fly their colors. When the Blakeists died, a piece of Battletech was lost. Blake be praised. The Blakeists in the Hinterlands. So yeah, again, this is the audience that follows me is a sample of the Battletech community. It's like there's going to be tons of people, but it is very true though what you say in the sense of like it means different things to different people. It means very different things to different people, which is also hard to gauge. Like what is actually interesting about it and to who. Besker says, most people I've talked to just want to canonically be able to play a Blakeist faction, have a master unitless support in later eras, because it's a bit demotivating to try to homebrew it all yourself. Yeah. I mean, there is one Blakeist faction that hasn't been killed off yet, as far as I know, which is the White Hand. Which... Well, but they're nobodies. Like, just to be clear, they're less relevant than the Blessed Order was. But the only one I know of that isn't dead is the White Hand, and they were basically people mostly LARPing the Word of Blake, as far as I remember. Because I don't remember a whole lot about them, but I'm pretty sure they haven't been killed yet. You'll note I put yet, because I don't think they're gonna survive.
I mean, we had the Word of Blake through the 90s to
2000 and well, I mean, really, like if we count Dark Age, which is really the canonical jump forward, like 2001, I guess.
Well, no, that was the point I was about to make. It's that since we had that whole era with FanPro and then Catalyst, we had a good chunk of time with the Blakeists, where people became invested and now they miss them. But to be fair, the Blakeists really were killed off like almost 25 years ago.
Yeah, by WizKids. WizKids are the ones who
played through the era. They were always going to be gone.
Damn it, Ray! Damn it, Red! You reminded Ray they existed. I have killed the White Hand in this conversation. All of you guys desperately clinging to the White Hand, you prepare yourselves for their death is imminent.
They are the dead hand.
I'm sorry, Ray. It's like now that Red has reminded Ray that there is still a Blakeist rebel group out there, prepare yourselves. Like shrapnel issue 20.
Well, no, like I said, we know that they're out there. We know that they're out there. There was the ghost of Obida.
The Ghosts of Obida, yes, by Herbert Bees, which we know that the Word of Blake proper didn't do the blackout, and they left. I love the scene where he's like, who caused this? It's like, what's going on? But yeah, and they left with an AI, like, which is suitably terrifying.
Yeah. That's a good question, Jeremy Thompson. So new Interstellar Players 4 with all the updates on the secret orbs when? Waiting on a revised outline.
Interesting.
Yeah. I don't think that's been mentioned. We are probably not going to call it Interstellar Players, but we may have to fall back on that title. But yeah, it's in development.
Fleem, that's not very nice to say. Fleem puts, Seafox, I can be your Comstar fan. Shut up. Beskar says the Blakists were my third option. The Blakist revenge will be to live well. They're out. They're out of the founding a new star nation, and that will be a utopia. I mean, utopia is a really interesting word to use for that, because utopia also means dystopia.
I think the thing to think about with the Word of Blake and any possibility of them coming back is that we never really got into the head of the Master. Herb Bees knows the Master.
Yes.
And he and I have talked about him extensively. And we've seen it on the page. It's just a lot of people don't get it. He really was playing the part of the bad guy.
He deliberately chose to be the bad guy. Yes.
To unify the Inner Sphere, and a lot of the upper echelon were in on it. They understood what they were doing, that they were sacrificing themselves
to make a new Star League. They wanted the Star League, like, even if they weren't going to participate in it, they wanted a Star League to exist.
So you have to imagine that if they're out there and they exist to this day in some sort of community or community cells, whatever, that they'd be keeping an eye on the Inner Sphere. And when the Dark Age happened, that was a red flag to them.
That's when they left.
Well, no.
Because the people on the Hidden Worlds were clearly left behind to keep tabs on what was happening in the Inner Sphere. And when they're leaving, which is really what they're doing, they say, this is the sign, this is when we have to leave. They see the Dark Age happen, they're panicking. Like, that's in the story. He's like, oh my god, all is lost. The prophecies are all true, and like they're getting out of Dodge now. Which
that cell.
Yes.
What I'm saying is there's the possibility that some other cells would see this as a call to come back, because it didn't work out. After 80 years or whatever, the plan failed. So what would be the next move?
I think that this is my hot take. I'm a crazy person, though, so you can ignore me if you like. But what I view, I don't think that the Word of Blake itself should be the first thing to come back. I actually would tie into the Schism, where, as bizarre as this sounds, like, if you take a look at the Blessed Order, the White Hand, and a few of the Neo-Blakists, they're not all going to believe a consistent thing. So what was interesting to me about the Blessed Order is they very clearly weren't following the Word of Blake. They were a continuation of the pre-Word of Blake Comstar's religious ideology. They're not out there talking about Thomas Marik. They're not out there talking about the Master. They were not secular Comstar. They were religious Comstar, but they were following, like, they were Toyamists, like traditional, like we follow Toyama. And they had a legacy in the original Comguards, because that's what founded them, more or less. I think I would do is, and I've mentioned this, I think, once. I think I talked to one person about it, but I'm just I am a crazy person. I would have them be like Gene Stealer cults, where, and I'm only using that because it's the quickest possible point of reference. I would not make them literally like that, but I mean, I would have it where the remnants of Comstar, not the Word of Blake, is embedded inside of several minor houses. They're embedded in several businesses. They're trying to pull themselves back together. It's sort of like if you watch what's its name? It's sort of like if you watch, like, the symbiote from Spider-Man or something get injured and it, like, tries to pull itself back together, like after it's lost a big chunk of itself, or like the T-1000 after it's broken apart. I would have it where they're missing all the HPGs, they're missing all these things, but they're parasites. Comstar's always been a parasite. That's what I actually find interesting about them. I would have it where they get involved with the underworld. I would have it where they get involved with trying to infiltrate houses and trying to like indoctrinate their kids and things like that to support this radical ideology. And I would have it where they have a small cadre, because you don't want big scale. These guys couldn't run the world or anything. You have a small cadre of people who they call upon if someone has to be bumped off. So it's like, oh, hey, there's there's training exercises. This person's supposed to be the next Duke, but I need to be Duke in order to ensure that the Order gets into this position so that we can control this business, so that we can do this thing, so that we can position ourselves to be successful. He needs to be killed by pirates. I.e., you're going to be the pirates to come in and kill him. But I would have it that if the word of Blake comes back, you have a mending of the schism in the sense of these people who've infiltrated the society. They have people who would blow stuff up, who would potentially attack intersphere forces and would have recognizable mechs, are in the background and undermining and destroying things, but they agree to they don't believe that Thomas Marik is the master. They don't believe in Napoleon or whatever, but they're forced with this terrible decision where they're like, so we don't believe this, but we have nowhere to go. Like, we can continue to languish in the shadows and we can continue to just hope things work out and, plan, or we can reach out to our long lost brethren who are finally returning, and we can agree to come together and assist them and join once more with the word of Blake and end the long dispute between what the fractured whole, even though they would obviously be junior partners to an insane degree. But that I would have them basically be something in the shadows, growing like a cancer.
I think that's really neat. The only issue is that doesn't give people the playable faction like the Secular or Word of Blake.
It does, though, because when you have those units show up to kill that guy, that's their company of mechs. It's a unit clad in white that comes out of nowhere and attacks a position or kills a specific person, but they're not going to be there for long-standing campaigns. They're not like, oh, we conquered 3 worlds and we brought a level 3 with us or whatever. It would be like a level 2 shows up, that these people have a resource they can call upon that's very limited, that's a very small force that shows up and tries to deal with certain problems. The way I put it is, it's like in Babylon 5 with, what's his name? Mr. Morden. Like, if they're cutting a deal with someone, their forces will show up for one battle to help you. But, there's a deal that has to be made. You're going to make an alliance with this person. You're going to give us this much money, or you're going to do this, and we can fix this problem for you, and things like that. Literally, I'd make them like the devil, basically emerging from the background from time to time, being involved. It would just be like a note in one book being like, yeah, so 18 mechs appeared out of nowhere during a decisive battle and killed the command of this one army before disappearing. Before they left, they decided to get back on their dropships and leave. But that's what I would do. I would have it where they're a very minor force that is just manipulating outcomes to better serve themselves.
Well, minus the HPGs, that is the pre-schism, pre-secular Comstar, pre-Comguard Comstar, because they used the Comstar prior to Thoth.
Yes.
Just nobody knew about it.
That's what I like, and again, I would not have it be like, oh, they're a major. It's be like, no, they're desperately hiding. They're cutting every bad deal they can. They're trying to bleed the houses for money, basically, or resources, and they're just a parasite. And which is even better because they're so low on the totem pole now. So, like, in terms of, like, they present themselves as being like, oh, well, we're an authority, blah, blah, blah. But in reality, they're bottom feeders. It's like, yes, Blessed Blake has shown us the way. It's like, yeah, most of our soldiers haven't been paid in 3 months. But soon, that which you have asked for will be delivered unto you. But yeah, like, again, they can't run the HPG network. That's like, you can't have. I think people misunderstand also, like, when people are asking for Comstar back, I don't think they're asking for, like, an enormous faction that is gonna like fundamentally change things. I think they're just asking for some remnant to be left over, but that's just my interpretation, and I'm a crazy person. Let's see here. Remember, we have 10 sects of Comstar beliefs. That is true. The Blakists became true evil masterminds of the criminal underworld of the Inner Sphere. Well, I mean, it would also follow in what happened with the KGB after the fall of the Soviet Union, because a lot of the KGB, this is pretty like obvious. They became basically using their skills and talents in organized crime.
Something to play with mechs painted white. Well, we could do that. We'll figure that out.
new Lyon unit. Oh my gosh. Most people don't want the Blakists to get the HPG back. They want the CIA/KGB Special Forces Black Ops religious nut jobs.
And then that's another angle. It's another angle.
I mean, that's what I would want. I'm all for like. I think I think the religious side of it is the only thing that has value at this point. I think secular Comstar is like there's nothing there in the sense of like, why do you want secular Comstar? They can't have the HPG grid, so there's literally nothing there for them. Like, the only thing of value is the religious nuts / intelligence operations side of the business, which is why I think they should just be parasites. Like, and making deals and literally playing the role of the devil on your shoulder. Showing up, you don't know who you're talking to, but they can make things happen for you, and just, you end up getting in too deep. It's like, or even though it's like, oh yeah, we've got this thing arranged, you'll marry this person, but that person's one of their agents who has their crazy beliefs, who wants to pass the crazy beliefs on to your progeny. I remember Brent stared at me in horror when I was like, yeah, I would love to have written a story about this one guy in the Eelkline era who finds out that his wife and kids are Blakists, and just what do you do about it? He's a count on some planet, and he's just like, when I die, and you have it where he has like a terminal illness or something, and he knows he's going to die in like 6 or 10 months, and he just finds out, he's like, what am I going to do about this? Like, can I let these people succeed me? Do I just go on as everything's normal? And because I'm a very dark person when it comes to storytelling, I'm like, and he comes to the conclusion that yes, he's, what, he can just live with it. He can just live with it. But again, I view them just as parasites.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm sorry. I didn't expect Comstar to actually be a major thing talked about on this stream whatsoever. I didn't.
Well, they are a major part of the setting.
Oh yeah, but like you'll note we've kind of focused for the most part on the stream on talking about new things. Like, talking about like what's happening right now, what's happening in these other places. I like, even lately on the channel, we haven't talked about Comstar in months because like there's just nothing really there to talk about, right? Like it's
but I mean, it's a loss to the setting, and to a lesser extent, the Republic of the Sphere. A lot of us that have been around for 40 years, 30 years may not really think of them much, but there are fans of the Republic that have been around for 20 years now or more, and they're gone. So that's another kick to the setting. For some people that I've spoken with, the Republic of the Sphere filled that void of a particular flavor of Comstar for them.
Yeah, secular Comstar in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's probably why people didn't vote for secular Comstar when it came to that poll. Is I suspect a lot of those people might have moved over to becoming pub fans,
and we're holding out hope for the Republic.
Yeah.
It's the idea that you have a faction that, while they're not perfect, it's the only faction that they're trying to be the good guys of the setting. That was secular Comstar.
Yes.
That was the ideal behind the Republic.
Yes.
And we don't have that anymore. We're back to all the factions out for themselves, clans and houses.
It's true. You're entirely correct. Nobody's really looking out for the general interests of mankind. Except for, of course, Blessed Blake's disciples. The word of Blake, often their distant star. They're looking out for what's best for everyone. Toxic Toast says, clearly what needs to happen is the merge with Clan Jade Falcon, Jade Star. You heard it here first. Yeah, I don't think that the Comstar fan, like, that's the other thing, is most Comstar fans don't tend to be clan fans. They tend to, or at least they don't tend to want them to be the same thing. So
yeah, the word of G.
The word of G. Oh my god, can you imagine if G was that much of a megalomaniac? Just shows up one day dressed in robes. Everyone, I'm founding a religion. First came Nicholas Kerensky, then came me.
Yeah.
I think it would be high priority for Catalyst to find a way to bring back, to not exclude any of their current fan base and undo WizKids' wrongs. It's hard, but here's the thing: it's hard. Like I'll obviously Ray will answer this too. I'm just going to add though, it's hard to undo every wrong. You can't really. But I do want to apologize to all the Comstar fans in the chat because I did get the White Hand killed. So when the White Hand does get killed by Catalyst Game Labs at some point in the next year, I do want everyone to know that it is my fault, and I do apologize.
Brian Davion, yeah, that's true though.
This is where a Compelling fan
is looking out for the good of all mankind.
The celestial wisdom has always been looking out for the good of all mankind, and thank God.
Yeah, just looking in the wrong places.
Big Red finished off Comstar tonight. Hashtag blame Red. So, damn it, Red! I will give you friendship. I will give friendship is magic to Randall. Do you know what friendship is magic is, by the way? Oh, everyone should I?
You showed me.
Oh yeah, that's the My Little Pony.
When did
that came out at the end of the summer. End of the summer, we had that come out. I have not checked my Discord. You will have to I will have to apologize. I didn't have that window open.
Oh, that ship sailed.
Ray's is sitting. It's like, I realize he's ignoring every text message. But yeah, I took a look because I have 3 monitors here. And it's on the right panel. I have all my notifications. If you note, I have not been looking right the entire time here. So, like, I managed to take a look right, and I saw, like, the little red indicator with multiple little pings. I was like, oh, I've been ignoring something. But did you have a good time on the stream today, Ren?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, get to talk about Battletech and all the fun stuff involved. We didn't actually talk about work, so that was great.
Isn't that awesome?
Yeah.
No, like, I just want to say, just as we enter in the last couple minutes here, sincerely, thank you very much for all of the stuff that you've contributed to the setting so far, and I really do mean that. Like, again, I don't always agree with everything, of course, but like a lot of the stuff that you've greenlit and worked with people with has been what's dragged me into the newer part of BattleTech. So, sincerely, thank you very much, Ray. I really do mean that.
Well, I really appreciate it. That means a lot. Thank you for everything that you've done with your channel. It doesn't have to all be positive. You have your opinions and the things you like and you don't like, but the thing is you like Battletech, and it seems that you've appreciated what we've done with it recently. That's cool, and I appreciate all the support from all the fans out there, whether they're new, you know, whatever period of time they've joined us. It's all of this, the appreciating of the thing that keeps it a viable IP that moves forward. And again, I'll reiterate, besides all the things that you do find disappointing, or where we don't stick the landing, you know that we are fans, all of us, we're part of the community too, and we are really trying to make all of it as awesome as possible.
You know, when I was at Adepticon, that's actually the biggest takeaway that I took from it. Like when I was at Adepticon, I was like, you know, I knew people were fans, of course. Like, you know, I understood that, like, you know, it's like, yeah, I strongly suspect Michael Saravella likes Battletech. I strongly suspect Michael Stackpole likes Battletech. Like, you know, there's some meaningful levels of evidence to prove that these things are true. But the biggest thing that I can't believe that I took from, and like, you know, basically being like, you know, a participant in it and getting to talk with people privately and stuff and just having very normal conversations, I was stunned that people were bigger fans than I was. Like, you know, because I've also worked in like corporate settings before, so I understand even if you like what you're doing sometimes and whatnot, but you know, the corpo element kind of like comes in. I felt weird because I'm like, I'm more of a corpo than most of you guys are, and I don't even work for you. Like, how is this possible?
Yeah. I mean, there's definite downsides to that, but the upside, I'll say again, is you know, all our hearts are in the right places.
Yeah, like I've always been pretty forgiving, I like to think, except for Dominions. I was not very forgiving about that. I always like to think I'm pretty forgiving, but I'm joking, of course. But
go ahead.
The thing about it is like, I became much more open to things that I wasn't necessarily fans of up until that point, when I realized just how much passion was going into it and the long-term planning that was involved with it, and just like where you guys envision it going. Like, you know, to me, that was the biggest turning point when I met you guys at Adepticon. I was like, okay, there's a lot more to this, in the sense of like just how much passion there is for the setting and just how much of a desire there is to take Battletech into a new age. And like, I like, again, I don't like, people will call me a sycophant or a shill or whatever. It's just like, no, like, you know, I'm not somebody who adheres to this idea that 3067 is the end of Battletech. Not only that, I will just be, here's the hot take. 3067 is a shitty time to end Battletech. If you're going to end Battletech, end it in 3060. My God. Anyway, but no, I really do mean that. Like, you guys at that place, I felt like I made a lot of friends while I was there, in the context of I met a lot of people, including the big Kerenskis and whatnot, like the big Kappas, who just absolutely love Battletech and love it in the same way I do, or even more. Which the even more part was the part that blew me away.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that.
So I've got a couple quick things here I am required to read, because I have to. From Thomas Craker, who's been a member for 21 months and a Captain General, which means he really supports getting artwork done on the channel. He says, I didn't like the Republic of the Sphere. However, I'm invested in the Remnants. Anything with them coming up?
It's hard to give a straight answer with that. I think the safest answer would be no. The Republic is dead, but it's obviously not as simple as that. We will see the remnants. We will see
mercenaries,
where the Republic goes. Not just that. We'll see the soul of the Republic continue. But the safest answer is no.
But just saying that, like, you know, a lot of these Republic forces, which have a lot of the ideals of the Republic, I can imagine you will see mercenary units of some note come out of that are specific hardened units that, you know, watched their state die. They're going to appear at some point after this, looking for work. You know, it's going to be like the Eridani Light Horses with the Star League, you know, like where they continue with the spirit of the Star League in many respects, you know, hundreds of years after it was already gone. Either that, or I'm looking too much into it.
No, I think it might not be the directions that people would expect. Let's give it a few months, and we can have the conversation again.
Oh boy. Then we've got playable factions can die, but they need even minor successors for those players to get as inheritors. I don't largely disagree with that, though. That's from Besker, and I do appreciate it, Besker. Though I am going to add a hot take. Yes, but sometimes no. But anyway, go ahead.
Well, with that, it's a balance between story and the business / game side. They have absolutely a point. And I, as the lead developer, I take full responsibility for the line. So you could yell at me about stuff from FASA, and I will take it to heart and listen to it. But it's not my fault. And I will say, in the company now, there's definitely the sentiment, the understanding. We don't take things away from our players, our customers, our audience. We don't take things away from you anymore. We can't completely undo what was done before we came to that realization. But yeah, you're going to paint up a bunch of miniatures. You're going to buy them, invest in them, play them. And, 18 months later, we say, yeah, they died. Sorry about that. That's no bueno.
Like, I mentioned it before, and people, like, the other thing about it is that I don't think people understand is people talk about how factions die in Battletech. They don't. Like, even if you look at historically, there have been, now, as of this moment, if you count not the homeworld clans, but they didn't really participate in the setting. And even if you remove the historical part, because let's be very real here, the Star League was not originally designed to be a playable era of the setting. Like, the Rimworld's territories was never a faction. Or, sorry, the Rimworld's, it didn't exist. It didn't have any, like, it existed for the sake of telling you why the Succession Wars happened. But if we look at it, the only factions that have legitimately died are the Republic of the Sphere, Comstar, and Clan Steel Viper. Every other faction in some way has a successor. Now, you might not like that successor. You might not like the Compelling Confederation if you were a St. Ives fan. But St. Ives is just part of the Compelling Confederation now. It didn't die. Those units are available. You can play them. The Rosselhaig Dominion. You might be a Rosselhaig fan. You might not like the Dominion. But the Kung's army is literally a part of the Rosselhaig Dominion. They didn't, they're not gone. They're a part of the Dominion now. Very few factions have ever truly been killed. And in terms of the living time of the game, Steel Viper, the Republic of the Sphere, and Comstar, they're the only ones who have ever actually died. I know, like, because I got into this debate before, like, because somebody's like, "Oh, tons of factions die." I'm like, I don't think that's actually true. And then I actually bothered to like go through it. I'm like, yeah, actually, no one dies. You just are. The people who made the game did such a good job convincing you that they did. Of course, every Homeworlds clan fan now is out here just like, I hate Big Red 40 Tech hates Homeworld clans, as I'm like a Star Adder fan, but it doesn't work. But I think that's it. I think that's it for the interview. I talked too much, but I listened a lot. Thank you for being on here, Ray. I sincerely appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on here.
All right, guys. We will. Oh, sorry to do that. I just want to make sure everybody knows. I will catch you guys either later tonight, or I will catch all of you guys tomorrow, and this stream will be left up, even though we used the dreaded word jihad.
Oh.
Who did that, Ray?
Ban him too.
Have a good one.
All right.